Oh, and we're live.
Hey.
Hey guys, this is Mark Stein of creditpathway.com speaking with David Snyder of NLP Power. Welcome, David.
Hey, Mark, how you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. So let's get right to it. I know you like to get right down to it. So as you are a master of NLP and hypnotic sales persuasion and everything in and around this space, let's talk about 2016 because I think that's a great starting point to move our conversation into really this idea and this general umbrella of sales influence. And let's talk about, we had the last presidency and, certainly the current and future presidency might very well be affected by someone who happens to be very powerful and very adept at sales influence and persuasion skills as a whole.
Okay, so you actually want me to answer a question there?
I do.
What exactly is the question?
Well, it's more of a talking point as to Donald Trump and how he's really just caught fire in terms of captivating an audience, and when we look at some of the massive mass persuaders out there. We're not going to name names, but people can come up with their own name as they imagine their experience and the experience that impacted them. What I really want to talk about is the power of sales in terms of how it affects the impact on the viewer or listener.
Well, first and foremost, you got to think about that word sales. I don't know if you can turn your speaker down because I'm coming through the headphones, which means it's probably going to impact your viewer's ability to listen. First of all, we use the word sales. We got to watch out when we start to use words like sales and manipulation and persuasion, because with every word that we use, we're dealing with three potential definitions, each of which have a direct impact on our thinking. The first is the dictionary definition. We all can go to a dictionary, we can look up selling, or we can look up persuasion, or we can look up manipulation. And if you look at them, the definitions aren't all that different, especially between persuasion and manipulation. Then you have what we commonly think of as, or we think of as the common usage of a word, as opposed to its dictionary definition, right? People who say, that's sick, or that's cool. Well, obviously, cool is slang, so there's a common slang term to it, but there's also a dictionary definition, and we understand that. But there's another level to our language that we need to understand, and it's the most powerful, but it's the most subtle, and that is what I call the meta message. When I say words like selling, or manipulation, or persuasion, there's a feeling that you get in your body when you hear that word, and especially true depending on what context I use it in. But you have to remember that human beings are not logical, data-driven creatures. They're feeling-driven creatures. And if you change the feelings in a human being's body, you change that human being's personality in that moment, and as a result of that feeling change, how they sort and relate to the information presented to them changes. So if you use a word like selling, well, we have a certain energy and a certain set of associations we bring to bear on the discussion. You could say Donald Trump's selling as opposed to Donald Trump's manipulation, as opposed to Donald Trump's persuasion, right? Each of them has similarities, but there's a different feel to each of those. So and even though it's not directly related, I think we need to understand when we communicate what is the feeling that a particular word generates in us. Because if it generates a certain feeling in us, there's a high, in spite of what we consciously mean, there's a high probability it will generate a similar feeling in somebody else. Now, in terms of what Trump is doing, again, Trump is a master of persuasion and communication. How could he? He wrote a book called The Art of the Deal decades ago, and you can't make deals without understanding how to understand people. Understand what motivates them, understand how to guide their perspectives, how to clear the blockages out of the way. But what Trump is doing, from the limited samples I've seen, is he's speaking to the part of the human body that is reptilian. He's speaking to the part of us that is tired of being pushed around, feels our homes and its safety is being threatened, doesn't want to be restrained, doesn't want to be bound, wants to be the top dog. You know, that's all a reptilian response. You have three brains. You have your paleocortex. Wrapped around that is your mammalian brain, which is your emotional brain, or your hypothalamus. Is that what I'm thinking of? Limbic system, sorry, not hypothalamus, limbic system. And then around that you have the neocortex, which is the part of you that thinks in data, facts, and figures. It's also the least informed and the last to know anything. And the only conclusions it makes is based on the information that the other two levels give it and warp it. So when Donald Trump gets up there and he starts talking about making America great again and talking about people invading us and doing these kinds of things, he's activating a very, very primal set of drives within us, drives we can't turn off. And when he speaks to that level, every level of the person's neurology has to pay attention, because if it threatens your survival, it threatens everything else, and the meat, more than anything else, is programmed to survive. All political correctness aside, you start speaking you start speaking lizard, as I like to call it. It doesn't matter what your limbic system wants. It doesn't matter what your neocortex wants. And the interesting part is when people try to use data and facts and figures to challenge a reptilian response, reptile doesn't like to think. Reptile digs its heels in and actually becomes more convinced of itself, because it doesn't like its freedom being impinged upon. It doesn't like its sense of autonomy being taken away. Right? So if you have an opposing viewpoint to the reptile response you're generating, it will tend to lock those feelings and that rationale in. Fastest way to keep somebody actually locked into their point of view, even if you've beaten them down with the facts, is to actually fight their point of view. Does that help?
Yeah, that's exactly how I wanted to frame and set up this conversation. And really, as we move along, what I want the viewer to pay attention to and focus in on is this idea and this concept that influence is happening, and you would agree with me about this, I would think. Influence is happening, and you are either at cause or effect. And whether we think it's good or bad or want to put a pejorative upon it, it's something that you need to be aware of, because if you're not aware of it, you are certainly at its mercy. So let's talk about that as we move along into internet marketing. And one of your many topics of interest, and as you're one of the Renaissance people that I know, and you're a ninth degree black belt, and you have certainly a whole slew of interests, and a lot of these items you're one of the best at. That being said, internet marketing. So let's talk about internet marketing and how someone, even if they're starting their business out, because at Credit Pathway we deal with a lot of startups, a lot of new businesses, a lot of entrepreneurs. And after we fund them, we want to point them in the direction of what steps can they take today, next week, in the immediate future to get their business marketed in the right direction on the internet.
Okay. Well, first of all, you have to understand that there are, for years I was actually very, very active with the San Diego Internet Marketing Meetup out here. It was probably the largest internet marketing meetup in San Diego. And I haven't been active with them now for 2 or 3 years, but they do really good stuff out here. But for 3 or 4 years, I was helping a lot of people in the same exact boat, guiding them through what I learned through getting my teeth bashed in by Google and all the AdWords and all the Google slaps and things like that. Back in the Wild West days of the internet marketing, where you could buy, Google AdWords for 5 to 10 cents a click, right? And send it to a page that was only marginally related to what you were actually selling or promoting. But one of the things that I think is relevant at a very nuts and bolts grassroots level is deciding what kind of a marketer you are. And what I mean by that is I've discovered that there are basically 2 categories of marketer. There's what I call the passionate enthusiast and the passionate marketer. Now, a passionate enthusiast has something that they love to do, something that they think they can make money at. And they're going to go out and they're going to create a business and learn marketing to promote that thing, that passion that they have. And that's okay. That would be me, honestly. But then there, of course, is the passionate marketer. And there's somebody who's in love with the process of marketing. They don't really care, to a certain degree, what the product is, as long as, hopefully, it's a good product and it's something that people want, that they can apply their marketing passion to. Over the years, I've become a little bit of both, because my field is human influence, whether it's influencing yourself, influencing other people to get over their blocks to success, control their subconscious mind, become a relationship magnet, remove traumas, whatever, or whether it's in the field of interpersonal communication and persuasion and influence, whether I'm teaching personal injury attorneys how to make juries love them and make judges love them, or sell, up your bottom line, or have departments in a corporation communicating better. These are all parts of my passions. Marketing falls into that because it's a form of human influence. So I'm at the same time from both camps, but by and large, you're going to fall into one or the other, and they're not mutually exclusive. So my advice to the passionate enthusiast is, make sure that you're not putting all your eggs in one basket. And what I mean by that is, you always hear this in the self-development and the self-help fields, is that do what you love and the money will come. No, that's not true, because they left a piece out. Do what you love, and as long as other people love it too and are willing to pay for it, the money will come. You see, most people, they get an idea for a business and they do that one thing. That's one of the problems that happens, is people get this idea for one thing and they think because they love it, everybody else will too. Be very, very careful, because there's nothing new. There's almost nothing new under the sun. Even though new shit's coming out daily, you'll almost always find out it's just another version of something we've already got. When you start generating an idea for a business, you need to do your consumer research. You need to make sure that the people that you're marketing to, that you're trying to reach, are hungry, that they're actually actively buying and paying for what you're offering, right? Don't be afraid if there's competition in the niche. That means there's money in the niche, right? Now, if it's super saturated, you may have to niche down, find a sub-niche within that you can function in and JV with, and create joint venture partners that are synergistic to build your list or whatever. But if there's no money in the niche, or if there's no competition in the niche, chances are you found an undiscovered pocket, unlikely, or other people have gone there before, didn't make any money, and got out. So don't let your passion for your niche override your business acumen. Look at the numbers. Look at what people are buying, look at where they're selling, look at how many competitors are in the niche, and have 2 or 3 other fallback niches that you can go into as well, right? What I like to tell people to do, because that's one of the things, one person comes up with one idea that they think will just overwrite everything, and that can happen. But a lot of times what I see when I'm coaching people is that they have 5 or 6 potential niches, and they're so inundated with choices they don't know where to start. And so I tell them, go back to the numbers. These are all 5 things. Let's say you have 5 things. There's 5 things that you want to do. Go do the research. Find out which one has the most potential. That becomes number 1. Second one with the most potential, number 2. And just organize it that way and do one. Just one. Get it profitable. Decide if you want to go deep into that niche or start your next niche, right? But at the end of the day, you got to balance your heart with your head. You've got to look at the numbers, right? Understand that patterns are going to tell you more about what the internet's going to do than anything else. Look at what the trends have been, how products have gone through their life cycle, and try to guesstimate where in that life cycle your niche falls, or where your product is, so you know how to structure your marketing. That's a little bit more advanced stuff, but at the end of the day, that's where you need to start. Because if you haven't done the research, then you could build all these really elaborate funnels and have this really cool page that nobody's going to come to and nobody's going to buy, because either they can get it for free or there's just not enough interest in it for them to actually want to whip out their credit card and get into your funnel. Does that help?
Absolutely. So specifically, most people think of Google, we like to call them the matrix, and SEO. Can we talk a little bit more about specifics with respect to, a lot of people, I think, get overwhelmed by these two topics, and certainly do a Google search on these topics and you're going to be even more overwhelmed. But what are some steps, and certainly we are surprised every day by some very simple things and very simple steps that people can take to essentially better plug themselves into Google and better expose their business to the quote-unquote search engines. What would steps along that train of thinking would you recommend?
Well, first of all, understand that Google was created by people. Even though it's an algorithm, or as some people like to call it, Google is Skynet, so expect the machines to take over any day. But the one thing that Google and human beings have in common is when a human being looks at another human being, what they're looking for is to see themselves reflected back to them. You've heard me say this in my books, and you've seen me do it over and over again in live demonstrations. Human beings have a checklist inside of them. It's hardwired into them, or it's firm-wired into them, I guess is a better way to say it. In NLP parlance, we would call that criteria and values. Criteria and values are the emotional triggers that cause us to do everything. Once you get beyond just the idea of basic survival, procreation, those kinds of things, you get into the realm of criteria and values, which are how we judge whether something is right and appropriate for us. Right? So it's all about not just what we get, but the way we know we're getting it. Every human being is engaging in a process known as projection, which means as I interact with you, as you interact with me, there's a little map that has a light being flashed on it that's reflecting into a mirror. And that mirror is, I'm looking at that mirror as I talk, and that mirror is projecting onto you what I'm looking for. It's a checklist. If you match my checklist, I qualify you as being more and more like me, and me like you. The more checks you get in my checklist, the more like you or like me you become, and the more I want to stick and connect with you. This is a fundamental, physiologically driven process. You can't escape it. It's how we work. Human beings create technology that inevitably mirrors and mimics the way they think and relate to the world. Google is a search engine algorithm that when it looks at your website wants to see itself. If you look at the front page of Google and you look at the links that are on the front page of Google, paid links aside, the links that come up are the ones that Google likes the best. When you create a website, keep that in mind. Structure your website based on the data Google is showing you. Now, it's getting harder and harder to do that because Google has started tailoring and customizing what you see on your search engine results. So the more unbiased a search engine result you can get, the more valid your information is going to be. That's the Google side. There's another side. There's the human side. The human side is, once again, there are things that human beings will say they want, that they say they will act on, and then there's the things that they really do. You can go to a keyword research company like WordStream or Market Samurai or some of these other SEO-based softwares, and they're going to give you clicks. They're going to give you, buying. Some will still give you consumer intent, although that's kind of gone off the wayside. But we don't really know what the human component is. And by and large, the search engines are going to give you information that is useful, but I find it actually kind of hinders my process. And so I just look at what people are clicking on in YouTube. You'll find that more often than not, the highest rated videos on YouTube wind up on the front page of Google. There's a reason, because Google wants to see itself. Google is YouTube, YouTube is Google. Even though YouTube is technically its own search engine, it is the #2 rated search engine in the world next to Google. So if you Google David Snyder, you will see massive amounts of search engine real estate, 90% of which was generated through my YouTube channel, which links back to my various websites. People follow that, and before you know it, you have all of this customer engagement. So you have to set up high-level content that engages people, that makes them happy, but is also based on their click patterns. The fastest hack I can give you to understanding click patterns and generating content that people will actually watch is go to YouTube. Take the keyword idea that you have, type it into that search engine bar. Look at what comes up. First of all, as you start to type it in, there will be an autocomplete function, and it'll show you all the relevant, based on what you're typing, all the relevant keywords. Pick one. Pick one, type it into the search engine, and look at what comes up. Now, what you get will be what Google thinks is most relevant, but that's not what we care about. What we care about is which videos have the most clicks. Which links did people actually click on? Then look at the thumbs up. How many liked it? How many didn't? Whether it's a thumbs up or a thumbs down doesn't really matter, because in order for them to give you a thumbs up or thumbs down, they had to have actually watched the damn thing. Right? So the hack is very simple. Look at the set number of YouTube views, which means that people clicked on that link. Create content that is relevant to your site based on what you find there, but also take those videos, if they're relevant to your niche, and embed them on your website. No content that you create in terms of video should ever go right to your website first. It should always go to Google, or it should go to YouTube. So you can go to Google+, Blogger, YouTube, post it there, and then post it on your website, link it to your website. Because Google is going to access Google first, and then it's going to follow itself to you. Okay? That's the more roundabout but very organic way to do these things. If you can kind of create in your own mind a click path that you want people to follow, then you can link people to where you want them to go next. But you have to have content that they're going to click on. To do that, you've got to look at what they've clicked on in the past. The fastest way, without sorting through miles and miles of keywords, is to just look at what people have clicked on in YouTube and build your search engine strategies from there.
Cool. So, David, let's talk about copywriting, the words that you actually write. And let's talk about how, and we're going to spare people from the NLP jargon and you know, the NLP words, but you know, it all is all the same in terms of getting your words to just dance off of the screen, paper, whatever, and create an emotional impact on the reader. How do we do that when we don't have the benefit of sound and the other, as NLP calls them, representational systems, meaning we're looking at a word, and how do we get the written word to impact the emotions of the reader?
Well, there's several ways you can do that. And when I teach my persuasion and influence classes, I teach people that you have to create a world and step in. You have to create the world that your subject lives in and step into it yourself, first and foremost. So there's 3 levels or 3 different approaches that you can take in terms of eliciting a set of states or a set of experiences. And we need to understand, when I talk about state, buying is a state. There's a state you go into right before you're about to press the buy button, right? How do we get people into those states? Well, the fastest way is to find something they really, really want more of, or something they want a lot less of. And we need to tap them into those emotions. The 3 ways we can do that is to describe a process, describe a situation, a scenario that they can identify with and relate to. The easiest one to influence any single human being is their own experience. It's the most powerful one. We can't resist our own experience. We can't resist ourselves. Okay? People will resist what you tell them, but they'll never resist what they conclude. As a neurolinguistic programmer and an expert in shit, SHIT, Specialized Human Influence Technologies. Not my first rodeo. My job is to understand their world so that I can lead them to a different one. Okay? People will resist what you tell them. They will never resist what they conclude. So it's vitally important that when you speak from a place of understanding their world, and you suck them into a world where you are both speaking the same language. That's the most powerful way to influence another human being. But it's not always the easiest one to get, because if you're a marketer, you're speaking literally to thousands and thousands of people, which goes back to a certain marketing tactic, whether you're utilizing email, video, or blog posts, or a sales letter. When you write, you don't write as if you're talking to everyone. You write as if you're talking to your best friend, your only friend, the friend you love most, the friend you care most about. Right? If you do that, and you come from that place of wanting to help, give first. Give them an experience. Give them a story. And then tell them what to do next. Right? If your story is something they can identify with and relate to, then they will go into a profound hypnotic state, because they have to in order to understand what you've written. So the easiest way to do that is to step into enough of your clients' mindsets and experiences to understand their world and write from that world. In hypnosis and NLP, we call that deep trance identification. But literally, you'll hear copywriters talk about entering the conversation that's already in your subject's or your prospect's mind. In order to do that, you have to actually step into them in some way and live the world as the person with the problem you're going to solve. You need to describe it the way that person would describe it. Complain about it the way that person complains about it. Talk about the things that they tried and failed the way that person would. When you do that effectively, then everything you say will resonate with the person who's reading its internal experience. They'll identify with you, and they'll start to trust you more. That's the biggest hurdle that we have in internet marketing, is getting people to trust us enough to invest in our solutions. Right? Notice I didn't say trust us enough to give us their credit card. It's a different mindset. Trust us enough to invest in the solutions we're offering. And we're offering it to them. We're not going to sell them, right? Again, there's a lot of do it now, do it now, do it now, and those things have a place in the internet marketing world. They're important calls to action. They're important. Scarcity principle never goes out of style. Reciprocity never goes out of style. These principles of social influence are part and parcel of direct response marketing, and no matter how pretty your website, you got to have them. Because if you don't give people a deadline, if you don't tell people what to do next, they'll do nothing. They'll do nothing. Right? You may make your writing or your storytelling a little bit uglier, a little bit more, I don't know what the word is, earthy, I guess, maybe. But that's why you're here. You're here to make money. You're here to do business. Now, you're here to help people. But there's no law that says you can't make money helping people. And you got to remember that. You have a right to the income you generate, as long as you do it in an ethical, honest way. And if you truly have a product or service that can do that, then you have every right to tell people what a great product it is, but you got to prove it to them. The only way you're going to prove it to them is if you give them an experience of your product, either virtually through telling stories, testimonials, or giving them a sample that they can actually go out and use. These are things that I have found over and over again to be the biggest conversion buttons that you have. But you have to get them to identify with you. You have to get them to believe that you've been where they are, right? The happy medium between your experience of their experience and their telling of it is universal experiences. We all know what it's like to go into the bathroom, sit down on the toilet, do our business, reach out and find out there's no toilet paper on the roll. That's a universal experience. As simple as it is, everybody who just listened to that can relate, because it's happened to all of us. It's a universal experience. You can start by talking about universal experiences. Things that are almost impossible for people not to have had and then lead them step by step by step into more precise or directed approaches. right? So it's always better to talk about general experiences first, then talk about your experiences, and whenever possible, pull their experiences, like using permissive language. Like, you may have noticed that, has this ever happened to you, or has that ever happened to you? These are things that cause them to go into their mind and find events and situations and circumstances that are directly relevant to what you're talking about. It gets them moving in and out of their mind, and that creates a fractionation effect, which trances them out and really kind of identifies them with where you're going. And as long as your copy is engaging, emotionally absorptive, they'll stay hooked. The minute the reader gets bored or his eyes get tired, they're gone. Right? So these are things that we need to start with. We need to step into the mindset and the problems and the desires of our number one client, our best client, the kind of client we want, one that will pull out their platinum card at the drop of a hat and buy everything, right? And everybody else will fall in a continuum, right? We need to step into their problems, their wants, their desires. We need to eliminate the possible solutions. You know, you've had this XYZ problem, and I did too for many, many years, and then I tried this and it didn't work, and I tried that and it didn't work. And go through every conceivable option that's available out there on the internet that they could have tried, and leave yours as the one solution that answers it all. But you have to start where they're at and work that way. Does that help?
Yep, absolutely. So let's talk about language patterns. It's probably the sexiest topic in the sales and influence space and the NLP space. And in terms of that, your model really uses language patterns that even if someone quote unquote catches you, and certainly people have accused me of using them in my writing, and I say, what are you accusing me of, being a descriptive writer?
Yeah.
How about we go into one. We obviously don't have time. We could spend the rest of the night on your specific language patterns that you've selected within your model. But why don't you pick the first one that comes to mind, and let's give the audience a written and verbal description on how to use and how you can use these to better impact your reader.
Well, probably the most directly relevant one to internet marketing, especially if you're going to be using sales copy, email, calls to action, testimonials, is probably going to be the Mac Daddy of. There's one that's actually more powerful than the one I'm about to describe to you, but it takes a little bit more background and finesse to use. But it's actually the one I'm not going to tell you about. Actually, is the most powerful language pattern on the planet, and you can't resist it even when you know it's being done. It's that powerful. I've openly challenged audiences all over the world to fight this pattern, and they can't do it because it's one of the fundamental building blocks of human experience, either subjectively or objectively. But what we're going to talk about right now is a language pattern that's commonly referred to in NLP and Ericksonian hypnosis as cause and effect. Cause and effect, words in this category are and, as, allows, causes, because, creates, makes, triggers. These are words in a category. And the way it works is anything that you can call attention to that a human being can verify is true. In NLP, they call that a PACE. For practical marketing, we're going to call it undeniably true. So if I call attention to the fact that the screen behind me is white and blue, you can look at it, you can say, yep, he's right. And I can say, I'm wearing headphones. You can look at the screen and say, yep, I'm wearing headphones. And you're listening to my words. And you can go in and you can say, well, yeah. And there's a part of you now going, where the fuck's he going with this, right? Now, how do you verify where the fuck's he going with this? Because what happened was when I pointed to the screen, you said, yep. And then I pointed to the headphones, you said, yep. And then I said, you're listening to my words. And then I said, and then you're probably wondering, where the fuck's he going with this? And there's a little voice that said, yeah, where the fuck is he going with this? That's called a lead. You see, when you paste something and then you connect it through one of those words, and you're probably wondering, the brain that parses between being told what to do and discovering what's true and validating what's true goes to sleep. And it assumes that everything that follows the pace is just as true as everything else. In marketing, you start talking about the facts. You start talking about experiences that they can't argue with. And then using these words, you tell them what to think next. Right? And you can do this cycling through all of your sales copy. You can cycle it through all of your email copy. Another real key word in this category is the word because. In email marketing, this goes directly to what is commonly referred to as the reason why. Hi, this is David from NLP Power. I'm emailing you today because my parakeet just had an existential crisis and he miraculously survived, and I'm so excited about it, I decided to celebrate by holding a sale. Right? When you do that, right, it doesn't matter why they're emailing anymore. It's no longer an intrusion. Right? And so that reason why goes right back to cause and effect. And one of the reasons that cause and effect languaging is so powerful is because all of your belief systems are built out of the structure that creates cause and effect relationships in people. It's neurologically hardwired into every part of every human being on the planet. So as long as you've pasted correctly, you've identified things that they cannot argue with, that they have to accept as true. And using that category of words, and, as, cause, causes, triggers, allows, creates, makes, you'll create a causal relationship between the things that are true and the things you want them to say, think, believe, or do. And they won't argue with it because it fits the structure that all cause and effect belief systems are based out of. And every belief system is based on cause and effect. So you're literally speaking the language of belief. It engages a process of presupposition in NLP we call pseudo-reality. Everything that comes out in this structure, the neurology, acts as if it's completely true, which makes it extraordinarily powerful for both good and evil. So be very careful with how you use this. If you're using these language patterns to take advantage of somebody, if you're using these language patterns to create win-lose situations, that's going to come back to haunt you. Okay? There's no need to do that. As long as you got a good product at a good price and you can reliably and honestly use these patterns to link what you want to what you want them to do, or what they want to what you want them to do, you'll make as much money as humanly possible by being honest and just telling people what to do next. Does that help?
Absolutely. So audience, as we move your attention from the last topic that we talked to, we're going to move your attention into the topic of conversion. And we've talked about it, so we're not going to go too deep into conversion, but
product placement.
Let's go into conversion and you know, keeping it brief because we're about to move into sales and one-on-one type of persuasion, which is awesome stuff. What's one brief tip that a viewer can employ in terms of increasing the conversion from the internet into real life?
To raise the conversion from internet into real life, is that what you said?
Yeah, increasing the conversion, you know, from their website into their list, into an appointment, into the area that we're trying to move them into.
I think the most important thing to do is to give value up front. You know, I think it's important that first and foremost you speak to their needs, the things they want less of, and how to get the things they want more of, in the language of that market, in the language of the people that you want to service. And I use that word very, very seriously, service, not in terms of you know, a butler or a waiter, but more in terms of like a doctor or a lawyer or a therapist might serve. You as a marketer are providing a solution, right? And so you need to make sure that your subjects really get the experience of being understood and that they can get those needs met by you. And then what you need to do is you need to give them a taste. You need to give them an experience of your product or service that they can go out and win with right off the bat, right? That they can prove to themselves the validity of what you have to offer, and then point out the next problem. Okay, you've solved how to, you know, approach a woman without fear of rejection. Now, how do you get her phone number, right? Or You've learned how to, to make your first $10,000 in trading. Now, how do you grow it even more? How do you keep those wins going, right? There's always the next level, but you need to give them something that's simple, easy, that they can do right now, that gives them that feel-good sense of accomplishment, and tell them where to go next.
Awesome.
That alone, and as long as you keep doing that, they'll keep buying.
Right. And obviously there's an element of reciprocity in what you're saying, and certainly the universal power of giving something first, and the person that goes first.
It's one of the prime mediators of social behavior. Reciprocity is the queen, if for lack of a better word, of the social hypnotic operators. Commitment and consistency, liking, scarcity, reciprocity. These are all things that need to be built into every aspect of your business. Right now, some people are very, very direct response driven. Some people are more blogging driven, where they're going to create content and create a little tribe, for lack of a better word. And ultimately, anybody who's successful in their niche is going to build, especially if you're an affiliate marketer, is going to build a following of loyal, or sometimes and very active, hyper responsive clients and subjects and subscribers. And you need to keep them engaged. You need to keep them as part. You have to build that tribe, even while you're expanding your reach. So you have to constantly remember that once they've bought, you haven't done serving them. The most return on your investment is going to come from your happy customers. We're always thinking more customers, more customers, more customers, but you get more actually. If the people have bought your product and they liked it, they're going to buy again. I have people who buy anything that comes out. I've had one person that's bought the same product 6 times, right? Because she thinks it's something different, and she just doesn't care. She just buys it again. I have to keep refunding her because she's buying the same product, right? And every now and then we update our products and things like that, but that's what you'll get. You'll get these hyper-responsive people who don't care if you're selling, as to quote Sam Kinison, they don't care if you're selling shit on bread. Because they trust you, because they like you, they'll buy, because you've created that relationship. They have so much faith and trust and belief in you as their friend, not just as somebody to sell shit, but as their friend. If you could hear, because of that freaking YouTube channel, if you could hear the calls I get, and now that they can show YouTube videos on your television, people treat me like I'm Tom freaking Cruise. Like, oh, I pick up the phone. Hi, this is David. Oh my God, it's you. Right? And I'm not pointing myself. I'm using myself as an example because I know my experience, and I got to know, if you got 1 million subscribers on your YouTube channel, you pick up a call from one of those subscribers, and you're talking to Tony fucking Robbins. That's that level of star power that you will develop as an expert in your niche. But you got to create the relationship. You got to feed it on the front end if you want to harvest it on the back end. So never be afraid of getting, showing your heart and showing that you're a human being to your customers. Create an identity, create a model, create a persona, but be authentic with it, and be true to it, right? So in terms of conversion, it's all going to go back to how much they trust you, how much they connect with you, how easy it is to click from one part of your funnel to the next. Remember, the confused mind says no, and if you give the human nervous system more than 2 choices, it will choose neither, more often than not. So one click or one call to action per step in your funnel is always going to maximize your conversions. Learn how to market to the reptile brain. And there's whole schools of thought on that, so I'm not going to bore you with it. But at the end of the day, speak to the problem and the conversation and the experiences in the mind of your subject. Show them you have the solution. Reward them handsomely for taking a step, and then tell them what to do next. Does that help?
Yeah, absolutely. And just to clear the gap there, the audio went out, but I'm almost positive you're referring to a confused mind says no. So yeah. When you provide too many options, that's almost providing worse than providing no options. And you've got to
one of the tightropes that we walk as marketers is that we want to give content, a lot of it, but at the same time, we don't want to overwhelm the reader or the viewer with too many choices. So your websites have to be simple to navigate, and and take them directly to the content they're asking for. Right? There's a lot of, Google started, many years ago, Google started fronting very, very heavily on these forced opt-in kinds of web pages where before you could access any content, you had to give us your email and stuff like that. I think that's kind of changed a little bit because I'm seeing a lot more forced opt-in kind of stuff, but it's also where you have the option to just click out and that little box goes away. So there's all kinds of things that have changed. I haven't kept up with all the bells and whistles in the internet marketing industry because my experience always showed me that marketers pretty much only sell you what has stopped working for them. So you're always getting second and third generation tech. So at some point you're going to have to find your own set of systems, your own set of direct marketing principles and what works for you and work within those niches. But learn to innovate, to emulate and then innovate. Don't just emulate and hope to reach the same levels as the people you're studying because you won't do it. You'll never get to the same level as they will. But if you start with them as a model and then innovate based on what works in your niche for you, then the sky's the limit. You're unlimited in what you do. Conversion is all about trust, making sure that they see the obvious answer to their problem and reward them for taking every step of the way. Every click that they give you, give them a reward. Tell them where to go next.
So the next topic I want to talk about is on influence of self.
Influence of self, okay.
Influence of self. And
okay.
A lot of people that are, and you'd mentioned dating, and certainly something I struggle with my whole life until about 5 years ago, is the idea. I've overcome it wildly. The idea of being able to approach a stranger, whether it's a woman or that you see on the corner or at a bar, or certainly relevant to this topic is a sales prospect. And this concept, and I've heard it called all kinds of things, but we'll call it what it is. It's the feeling of anxiety within self in terms of your projected outcome. So I'd like to talk about that, and then as well, relatively related, is motivating yourself. But how do we better influence ourselves? NLP calls it state, and it's in your model. How do we take control of our internal experience as it relates to the sales call or sales interaction?
Okay. Well, first of all, the fastest hack that you can get is to change your posture and your breathing. Okay. If you haven't seen the TED Talk by Amy Cuddy called Power Poses, that should be your first read after you've gone through this particular video. Understand that your posture and your breathing will dramatically influence every psycho-emotional state that you have, because every psycho-emotional state that you have has a posture and a physiology. And the ones that Amy teaches specifically in that video go directly to sales, marketing, interviews, negotiations, mediation. It should be standard and really basic training for anyone who's going to go out there and talk to another human being or group of human beings. The second thing you want to learn to do comes in two flavors. A, you want to clean up your shit. No human being comes out of the womb afraid. I mean, they start to develop fear as they're going through the birth process, because you're going from something that's very comfortable, very safe, to something that's very unfamiliar. But as a rule, we learn to be afraid. We learn to feel lower than. We learn to feel all these things. They're taught to us by the people who we view as authorities and that we identify with from the 0 to 5. Now, I should clarify, people do come out of the womb afraid, but they're not conceived that way. They can acquire those fears because their mom, who was going through certain feelings, had those feelings. We can clean those up too. It's all fixable. Okay, the longer I do this, the more I see that there's very, very an ever decreasing amount of things that we can't address. But in terms of call reluctance, approaching, you got to clean up your shit. You got to clean up all the reasons why you internalize that you're less than. The second thing is you got to start making pictures of yourself bigger than the pictures of the people that you're going to be presenting to, because inevitably when it comes to self-image and self-esteem, if you were to create a picture of yourself with your sales prospect, depending on how much you wanted that sale, the actual relative size of the prospect to you can be significant. If you change it then you change how you feel about that person. And if you really change it, now you take over the frame of the interaction. That's something that's you need a little bit more training to do, but once you understand how it works, you can put yourself in any state you want. Here's the hack. When you look at a stranger, you need to stop thinking of them as your stranger. You need to think of them as your best friend and feel towards them like they're one of your best friends and approach them as if they're one of your best friends. And what you're going to discover is when you do that, the words that come out of your mouth will have a much different feel to them, even though you're saying even if you're doing a canned sales presentation, the feelings that you generate in your body will change everything else. When I teach people persuasion and influence, and I have a complete system that is just ethically unfair in terms of it's just so powerful and so ethical and so honest and so irresistible that it should be unfair, but it's not. It's actually the most powerful, ethical, and honest way to communicate with another human being and make them want to do what you want them to do. The moment you can generate feelings in your body, everything else that you're trying to affect in your presentation takes care of itself. When we try to present, the way most people are taught to present in a sales call is you have a canned presentation, you have set techniques you're supposed to use to get rapport, set of objections that you're going to use when they throw out the inevitable bombs to the presentation you're going to give. And you're going to have to try and manage all of that and get them to trust you. Well, it doesn't take long before the whole nervous system goes into a sense of overwhelm. Things start being out of certain sets of behaviors, tonalities, speech patterns become dramatically out of proportion with what they would be naturally if you were in a calm, confident, rational, professional way. Whereas if you, and the idea is if we affect these things, we'll generate a feeling of trust and connection with the client. It doesn't always work that way, and that's why we have so much trouble. If we generate the feelings in our body first, then the feelings will create a set of perceptual filters in our mind, the way we perceive the environment, that supports those feelings and reinforces those feelings. It'll generate a tonality and a tempo and an attitude within us that reinforces and is congruent with the feelings that we're having. As a result, when we speak about our product or service from that feeling space, we will be more authentic, we will be more congruent, we will be more trustworthy, and people will simply relate to us better and comply to what we want. And that's where we start. We'll eventually show you how to go into and out of any psycho-emotional state you want, generate the feelings, and transfer them right into the subject so that they start to feel the way you want them to feel before you've even opened your mouth half the time. But that's, in essence, when it comes to sales call reluctance, remember that every fear you have, you learned. If you can learn one thing, you can learn something else or unlearn it. Right? There's nothing wrong with you. It was just something you learned, and until your unconscious mind has a better way to do it, it's going to keep doing it. And it's going to take more and more willpower to get out of that car or pick up the phone or get out of from behind the computer, because your unconscious mind is far more adept at generating excuses than your conscious mind is. Okay? So clean up that stuff, remove it, build in the feeling states that you want to have, focus on what the sales call will get you and not on the sales call itself. Remember, your goal is to go out there and help people get what they want. As a result of that, you're going to get what you want. Don't focus on the sales call. Focus on the reward of going out there and making the sales call, because that's what's getting you out of bed in the first place. Inevitably, when people lose motivation, it's because they move from focusing on the reward to focusing on the steps, the process. Focus on what you want and do the steps rather than focusing on the steps you don't want to do. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I want to give a tip that the viewer can put into practice right now while they're listening, and I'm going to actually ask them to go ahead and do it. And it's something, specific to what we're talking about. Something that we did in one of your meetups, the Rocky Hands. And
Rocky Hands? You mean this?
So, yep.
Okay.
And so go ahead and let's all do it together. You can see my sweaty armpits. And
that's right.
What you'll notice.
Go ahead.
what you'll notice is as you're sitting in your, or stand up even better, is you can't help but feel calm and confident and in a state of mastery, and that can override your internal state of anxiety. And interestingly enough, I actually used it once. I was at lunch in Mission Valley, and I saw a girl I wanted to talk to. She was sitting with her friends in a normal environment that most people would just be way too intimidated to put themselves out there. And of course I felt and experienced that reflective anxiety. Went in the bathroom and threw my hands up, and sure enough, overrode the experience. And I think just so that the viewer can connect with practical things and practical actions that you can take to control your internal experience, that's a relevant example as to how we can better take control of what we're actually experiencing and influence ourselves. And if you did the exercise just now, you'll notice that in about 30 seconds, and David has a whole bunch of these, your experience shifts, and it shifts powerfully, and it shifts powerfully in a direction that you are taking control of it. And for me, and I think for a lot of people, we just don't want to feel that we're subject to what we're experiencing and that we're a slave to ourselves rather than putting ourselves out there. And I think the idea and notion that we're taking control of our lives and exercising free will is actually even more important than what it is that we're going after, whether it's a big sale or whatever. And I think that's really relevant to this idea of controlling our internal experience first and foremost. So I don't know if you want to add to that.
Sure. Well, first of all, what the exercise that Mark showed was a powerhouse of a drill. But if you're going to do the exercise, there's certain parameters and certain things you need to understand. First of all, 30 seconds is not going to necessarily give you, it'll give you a taste. But what you want to do is you want to hold this for a minimum of 2 minutes. Now, when Amy was testing this, and this position has actually been clinically tested, they took blood samples, before and after blood samples. And they would have their test subjects, they had control subjects groups as well, they would have their subjects hold this position for 2 minutes or longer. And what they noticed was when they took before and after blood tests from holding this position for 2 minutes or more, they noticed that in the people who held this position for 2 minutes or longer, there was at least a 25% bump in the testosterone levels in their body and a corresponding drop in the levels of cortisol. So not only did they become more assertive, dominant, and confident, they also became more relaxed. Now, just shifting the physiology, even if this weren't a power pose, as Amy likes to call it, would significantly change your psycho-emotional state. Now, there's lots of drills that I do. We don't have time for them here. If you come out to our meetups or you look at some of our videos on on our YouTube channel or NLP Power or davidsnydernlp.com, you'll see me doing this stuff with the audiences over and over and over again. But you want to hold this posture for at least 2 minutes. What you're going to notice is as you approach that 2-minute mark, there'll be almost kind of like a tension that builds up in the body. It's almost like there's a part of you that wants to stay the same and a part of you that's fighting to change. Once you break that 2-minute mark, or within a few seconds either way, you're going to notice almost a shift or a relaxing and a sighing into that feeling. And the longer you hold it, the more powerfully that state is going to build within you. Now, here's a little funny story with that. And one of the ways that they tested this, by the way, besides the blood test, was they actually took these people who held this posture and they simulated the most violent, vigorous, challenging job interviews that they could come up with. And they sent these people in over and over and again. And consistently, the people who did that posture prior, or one of the other power postures that Amy teaches in the video, prior to going in to the meeting, always scored higher by the interviewers who were specially trained to give no feedback whatsoever, or all consistently scored higher by the interviewers than the people who did not do these postures. There is no place where these postures will not help you. I mentioned earlier that I'm a consultant. I work with a company known as Next Trial Innovations. We specialize specifically in teaching advanced communication, influence, and persuasion skills to personal injury attorneys, the good guys, the ones that actually cry when their victims are hurt. One of my my students actually was going through a very, very tough case. He was getting his butt handed to him, literally, by a very high-powered attorney. Lots of lawyers. He was one guy against, 2 or 3 others. I'm filling in some of the details. They're a little hazy. But one of the things he would do is every chance he got, he would hit that restroom, and boom, he would go in there and he'd hit that posture for 2 to 5 minutes. He'd come out. He said it didn't last all day, but he could give himself boosters for that, and he did very, very well. But that's not actually the funny story. The funny story was his client, in addition to being being a victim of an accident, was also the head football coach at one of the local high schools. And as part of my client's job is he has to prepare his client to take the witness stand. His client had massive stage fright. I mean, the guy couldn't string 2 words together without wanting to faint and break out in a sweat. So he literally taught the guy how to do the power pose, and had him drill it over and over and over again. And the guy went up on stage, or up onto the witness stand, and just rocked it, right? But that's not even the story. The story was the coach, little did we know, had been going back and teaching his football team, who had had a consistent losing streak for the last 3 or 4 seasons, how to do this before every game and during every intermission, and they took the championship that year. So it's not just relevant to selling. It's not just relevant to dating. It's relevant to any place where you need to be strong, confident, assertive, and outgoing and dominant. So you can't do it too much, right? So yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and even expanding upon that, there's hacks and tweaks that you can make it even more powerful than just extending the time of it. So
absolutely. And one of the fastest ways to get the biggest bang for your buck on the generative side is to clear up the stuff you're carrying around inside of you, the little movies that play every time you have to approach a human being, and there's any notable similarity between that person and something that happened to you in the past, which is what happens. Your nervous system sorts for similarities, and it plays what's familiar.
Yeah, and not to tap on this button again, but I'm going to. The cool thing about when you begin to take control of your state and begin to take action is not necessarily the results. The results will come, but your focus shifts, and your focus shifts on being someone who does take action, and that's actually a way that that quite possibly the best feeling that you can experience as a human being, and what you'll begin to realize and begin to become more aware of is that the focus shifting of becoming an action taker is awesome. So
nothing will give you confidence faster than taking action. I want you guys, at the risk of alienating every single colleague in the self-help community, remember something. If you're waiting to be confident before you take action, you're going to be waiting the rest of your life. Confidence is bullshit. Think of all the times in your life when there was something you had absolutely no confidence in, but it had to get done. And so you went and did it anyway. And you nailed it. Would that be true more often than not? Mark, what do you think?
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm not a born speaker. I get nervous.
Yeah.
Right? Not horribly, but for the and people notice it for the first minute or so. But I know it's going to pass, and
just
as it passes,
the commodity that the self-help community has sold the vast majority of people is that in order to start anything, in order to do anything, you need to be confident. That's not true. What you need to be is determined and relentless. Okay? Confidence, when you did those things, using Mark as an example, when you stood up, when you did that 100 approaches in a single month, right, and broke through that shell, right, when you got up in front of the rooms and started making your speeches, even though you were nervous, when did the confidence come? When did it come? I'm betting it came after the event.
Of course.
Right? Confidence will always come after the event. You see, the self-help industry has sold you a bill of goods, that if you're just confident, that's all you need. Well, you're never confident enough. You ask the most confident SOB on the planet if they need more confidence, and they'll say yes. Right? What you need is to be relentless and determined. Confidence is an end state. It's what arises after you take action. So as you begin to become more aware of taking the action first and that ever-growing sense of confidence within you, you'll rapidly realize that what you learned on Mark's podcast today was one of the best decisions you could ever have made to get and become the person you want to be and have the business you want for yourself. It just makes sense.
Yeah, and last point is, and Arnold Schwarzenegger says this fantastically, don't listen to the naysayers. If you sat there and listened, and it's funny when you watch these Google interviews or YouTube interviews, that you'll see hater posts one after another picking out something to criticize, and of course you invariably ask yourself, how many videos do they have posted?
Remember something, if I could, and I'll let you close it up however you want to close it up. Remember this, guys. A, if you're not getting refunds on your product, you're not marketing hard enough. Okay? If people only like your stuff, you're not reaching enough people. The comments that people make about you or your stuff will always say more about the person making the comment than it ever will about you. Okay? So these are lessons I've learned the hard way. Take it for what it's worth.
So we kind of led into it. We were talking about, you know, dating and putting yourselves out there, and along those lines, we like to, because we believe in personal development, real personal development, and how it impacts and affects the life of the entrepreneurs that we deal with at Credit Pathway and business owners and startups. What, you know, obviously you've got probably 100,000 of them, and I certainly know well. What's something that comes to mind that someone can employ today, tomorrow, this week, as a practical tip that they can take action with respect to their own personal development and how it affects their life in general?
Well, I think the most important thing is do an inventory of your values and your criteria. And what I mean by that is, when you think about the things you want, ask yourself a question. What's important to you about that? And then write that down. And then ask yourself another question. What's important to you about that? And just keep drilling down until you reach a point where you just, 2 or 3 levels down. And what you want to make sure of is, as you drill down, notice how your emotions change. Because it's the emotions that are going to get you out of the car, that are going to make you walk up to that door, that are going to make you pick up that phone. The emotional drivers for those things that you want. And have a checklist. Create a list of how exactly what you're going to see, what you're going to hear, what you're going to feel, what you're going to taste, what you're going to smell. When you've achieved that, how do you know you're getting that value? Right? And keep it next to you everywhere you go. Whenever you start to lose your motivation, whenever you start to get tired, whenever you think, maybe I'll just take a break and watch the Three Stooges or play a video game, look at that list. Play those movies of you having those things and what they mean to you and why they're important. And as you do that, you're going to find that getting out of that car one more time or picking up that phone one more time is going to be a whole lot easier, because you'll know why you're doing it. You'll know who's getting the benefit, right? Remember, at the end of the day, you can get anything in life that you want by helping enough other people get what they want. But you can't even start that until you know what you want. Once you know what you want, you know how you know you're getting it, you know why you're doing what you're doing, everything else kind of takes care of itself. That'll motivate you.
That's awesome. As usual, I can't find a better place to end than at that point. And thank you for your time, David.
My pleasure.
For the viewers, we want to give out your link. They'll see it on the screen, but as well, can you? You prepared a special gift for those that watch today. Can you tell them what it is and where they can get it?
Well, one of the things that most of your viewers probably don't know is that Mark was actually the reason that I'm in business again. I had actually retired from the influence and persuasion world many years ago, and Mark had gotten a hold of one of my products, and he actually called up and started asking me questions, and then he started hounding me about doing events. And first I wasn't really sure I wanted to even do that, and he kind of lit the bug in me, so to speak, and I've been on a roll and growing ever since. So it's kind of fun and kind of I guess, poetic, really, that I'm here with you now. But one of the things that came out of the meetings that Mark hosted for me initially was this thing we call the NLP Power Mastermind Mentoring Group. And what the Mastermind Mentoring Program was, it was my skill sets, your applications. And so what would happen is on the third Saturday of every month, a group of people would come in, and I would literally go around the room. I would say, okay, Jason, what do you want to learn today? James, what do you want to learn? Jeff, what do you want to learn? Mark, what do you want to learn? Eric, what do you want to learn? Katie, what do you want to learn? Cynthia, what do you want to learn? And I would literally write all of those things down on my whiteboard, and I would look at them, and I would find all the connecting threads, and I would create a lesson plan right on the spot. And for the next 4 hours, I would drill the mastermind students on those precise skills for the applications they needed in the real world until they could do them in their sleep. And I've been doing that nonstop since 2010. So we're going on 7 years with the world's largest, only, as far as I know, paid NLP skill building group. It's not a certification track. It's pure skill driven. We have salespeople, marketers, therapists, coaches, you name it. They come in, they learn what they need to learn, everything from attraction to marketing to therapy to advanced persuasion and influence. If it involves influencing the human mind or body, it's on the table, right? And what we've been doing since 2010 is we've been videotaping all of those sessions, and we've been archiving them on the NLP Power Mastermind website. And so what I've got for anybody who is watching this podcast is we've given every one of Mark's subscribers and everybody who sees this video hereafter a free 30-day, 100% no-holds-barred VIP pass to all of the Mastermind archives. For a full 30 days, you can go in, and if it's on the website in the Mastermind archives, you can watch all of the drilling and all the skilling. Now you're going to see, because a lot of people have the same issues and a lot of people have the same challenges, that a lot of the stuff is a little repetitive, but you'll see different tweaks and modifications. And then we got everything from 2010 all the way up to 2016, and we actually have a backlog. We're constantly adding new video because we're constantly processing those things. But for everybody here, my gift to you for kind of hanging out and joining us today, come out to nlppower.com/HTL2015. We'll give you a free, no-holds-barred 30-day VIP pass to my internet marketing, my NLP Power Mastermind videos. And if you have questions or comments or things, email me, and if I can point you in the direction, I will. But that's what we got for you, and I hope you guys enjoy it.
Thanks, David. And guys, if you're looking to get your business funded, don't let the bank tell you no. We're here to help. Creditpathway.com, and of course, go ahead and get David's program, as he mentioned, and that's the understatement of the century. There is a lot of content there. And have a good night. Thanks, David.
Thank you.